Well, welcome everyone. We are so glad that you are joining us today. We're going to talk about implementing the 5R's of healthy brain development, which is it's a component of 0 to 3's growing brain curriculum. Patty and I, we are certified trainers in that curriculum. If you go to 0 to 3, you can actually find out a little bit more if you're interested in also becoming a 0 to 3 trainer. But they have this, it's really like 7 units and we're only focusing on like a small snippet of the unit today, really just to give a little bit more information and just dive a little bit deeper. So we are going to really focus on these 5R's, but think about how to implement it, because we know that we should all be supporting healthy brain development, right? And so that matters, and that's really important. I think the intentionality is really key to it. So let's go ahead and get started and just hang in there with us for the next hour. We're going to give a little bit of a background just for those that don't know us. My name is Lisa Terry. I'm an early intervention professional development consultant. I would love for you guys to go ahead and type in chat, what's one fun fact about yourself? So you guys go ahead, type in chat one fun fact about yourself, and I'll give you a little bit more background information on myself. I live here in Virginia Beach, Virginia, so I get to enjoy the beach, which is always nice. I have 5 kids. My youngest, he's 7, and then my oldest is 20. So very wide range of ages. And so they definitely keep me busy. And like you can see in this picture, this is how I feel most of the time. I feel like I'm just juggling a lot of different things. For our free time, we love to go on hikes. We love to go to festivals and theme parks, and really just making those memories together. That's really something that's really important for us. I am also a DEC RP ambassador, and so I really work on helping to promote some of the ECTA checklists and the DEC recommended practice tools. So if you guys ever have any questions about that, feel free to reach out to me. You can always email me. I'm also endorsed as an infant family specialist too in infant mental health. So welcome, and I'm going to pass it over to Patty to tell us a little bit more.
Thanks, Lisa. I'm just reading a few of the comments in the Whova chat, and Pam was an accountant prior to being a teacher. Talk about a career switch, right? And then Teresa said she has 4 children. Her oldest is 32 and youngest is 12, and 2 grandchildren. Teresa is quite busy, just like you, it sounds like. So yes. Very cool. Very cool.
I love it, Teresa. I love it. Yes.
That's amazing. So a little bit about me. So I'm up in Northern Virginia. So I work for the city of Alexandria, which is just outside of DC, right across the Potomac River. And I am an early interventionist, have been for over 15 years, or spent 15 years practicing as an early interventionist. And now for the last few years have been doing mostly professional development and early childhood training for our early childhood programs, both with the school system, with early intervention, and then primarily more recently with our childcare providers, our in-home childcare providers. And I'm using this curriculum, the Growing Brain curriculum, as a 7-session cohort course on my 4th cohort with them, obviously all virtual. So that's been fun, been digging into this curriculum and seeing what we can do with it. And I also like to practice yoga regularly. Fun fact, I leave for Crete next Thursday for a yoga retreat. Really, really ready for that because it's been a very busy, busy 18 months. So, and then I also work part-time at a winery on the side just for fun. I love wine, so I wanted to learn a little bit more about it. And I have traveled to 39 states and 44 countries and counting. So traveling and wine and yoga are my pastimes when I'm not working and help keep me balanced. I like to have a balanced life. So what is the farthest you have traveled? You can type that into chat if you want to join me in my little travel escapades and tell me where you've traveled before and where's the farthest you've gone. Mine is New Zealand, Australia, which New Zealand has my heart. So I've been there many times and have good friends there. Puerto Rico, Calgary from Texas. Awesome. Canada, St. Martin, Sweden. Oh, Sweden's on my list. I haven't been there yet. Have been to other countries in Scandinavia. So awesome. All right. So we can go on.
I forgot to mention too,
Yeah.
because we have like 2 different chats going on. We have one in Whova and we have one in Zoom. I'm kind of looking, I can only see the Zoom since I'm sharing my screen, and then Patty will kind of keep an eye on the Whova. But if you guys would, like, I would love it if you guys just could post or type in chat in the Zoom app, just so that way we can both see it. Because I think you can see the Zoom chat too, right?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
I'm going back.
But if not, then Patty's going to watch the Whova one too. And we do have some Zooms. So you got South Africa, Spain, 10 miles from the Great Smoky Mountains. I love the Smoky Mountains. Glasgow in the Zoom chat too.
Excellent. South Africa's on my list too. They have good wine there. So there's a reason, that and animals. So, all right, we could talk about travel forever, but that's not what this session's about. We are going to talk about the 5 R's of healthy brain development. So on your screen, you're going to see our learning objectives. Those 5 components we'll talk about today that promote healthy brain development obviously start with the letter R. And number 2 is practicing and implementing those 5 R's. Lisa and I obviously both are practitioners. So, and we've both been doing trainings and attending trainings for probably most of our careers. So we have a big, strong basis, and I want you to come to a training and walk out of a training being able to actually implement something we've talked about in your sessions right away. While content's always great, you want stuff that you can actually walk away with and take and apply right away. So we'll use a case scenario to do that, and then we'll learn one strategy for each component as we go along as well. So next slide, please. All right, so how do you support brain development in your current role? So go ahead and type into chat either in Whova or in Zoom. Lisa will monitor the Zoom, I'll monitor the Whova. What your answer is to that question. How do you support brain development in your current role? And I'll give you a few seconds. We decided on Tuesday we were going to play the Jeopardy music whenever we were waiting for people to type into chat. Lisa says she plays the ukulele for my students and love cats. I have 2 cats, so if you hear thunder in my house, they're both chasing each other upstairs right now. So, all right. Anybody have any ideas? Anything in Zoom chat, Lisa?
Nothing yet.
Okay, Pam said, read language-rich environment. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I was a huge reader as a child. Erin says, enriching routines. Fantastic. Absolutely. If you want to elaborate on that a little bit, Erin, you're welcome to. Encouraging reading to children. Yep, absolutely.
Carrie says, building relationships. Yes. And we're going to talk about relationships, Carrie. So you're setting it up nicely today.
Sing songs and listen. Support bonding and attachment. Awesome. I love when they give answers right to where we're going. We work on familiar songs and books and then add a new element to the activity. Excellent, Sandra. That's perfect. Perfect. Excellent. All right. Okay, so let's go on to the next slide. Lots of reading, lots of singing. Obviously, reading is a big, we promote that a lot in our field as well. So, which has always been easy for me because I was a ferocious reader as a child. To the point that my parents would tell me to have put down the book at the dinner table because it was distracting. So, but okay. So on the screen, you're going to see those 5 R's of healthy brain development. We're going to break them all down, but they're listed: relationships, responsive interactions, respect, routines, and repetition. So we're going to dive into each one of them individually. So let's start with relationships. And relationships that are involve secure attachments with caregivers are really, really essential. And we know that from the very beginning of a child's life. As soon as they come out of the womb, they are needing to form that relationship and that attachment so that they feel secure. And those relationships and those attachments need to also be healthy. That's going to support that healthy brain development. So when we're working with babies that pretend maybe are in foster care or maybe being adopted or a different type of scenario that is not your mom, dad, biological parents, we have to think about how that relationship is developing and how that security, that attachment is being embedded in that child's life from the very beginning. So it's essential to remember that trusting relationships are needed for all relationships between teachers and children, foster parents, grandparents, caregivers, whatever, obviously early interventionists, therapists, anybody that interacts with that child in their life. Those trusting relationships are really, really important. So although research shows that only one strong positive relationship is essential for a healthy brain development, obviously we want most of those relationships to be healthy and strong as they're interacting with that child. Children can also focus on their most important task, learning through play, by developing those positive relationships with children and adults when they feel secure, when they feel safe, and their physical and social needs are being met. Lisa and I did a similar presentation to this with a physical therapist a couple of years ago. And when you think about a child learning how to walk, that child will let go, and that child will, when they feel safe and secure in the relationship with the adult that's with them, they will let go to take those few steps and walk away from that parent, because they know that parent or that adult is there to catch them because they feel safe and secure. So that relationship that they've developed in those first few months of their life becomes really, really important as they're learning to develop new tasks and learning new parts of their development. Children who don't have the opportunity to form these bonds experience poor development early on, and they might exhibit behavioral issues as they get a little bit older. So we want to be able to, as early interventionists, when we're going into sessions, we want to be able to observe the relationship and the attachment with children and their caregivers as we're working with them in their homes. So next slide, please. Thank you. All right. So when we think about our sessions as early interventionists, on all of our interactions as early child or our interactions as early childhood teachers, we didn't ask who we have in the audience today. We usually do that. We forgot. But take a minute to chat and how we can include all the caregivers that are supporting relationships with our children. How do you do that in your sessions? How do you include all different types of caregivers? And you can see by all the pictures on the screen, those caregivers can be a multitude of different types of people. So type into chat what you guys do to support that. All right, I'm going back. I'm going back to see what we have in Whova. I love to read. I'm assuming that meant teach baby massage techniques to foster adoption families to build mutual respect and bonding attachment. Safe physical touch while observing nonverbal cues to keep going and shifting gears. That's wonderful, Sarah. That's a fantastic strategy. Conversations with the family as you see them. Sending positive notes home. Absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's harder for classroom teachers to develop those relationships with parents because you just simply don't see them as much, or you didn't when we were all in person. Whereas early interventionists, we tend to be in the home. Obviously, everything has shifted the last year. And I think the opportunity for relationships has actually shifted and changed, and sometimes for the better, because parents have had to be a little bit more involved as their kids are participating virtually in things. What's going on in the
yeah, so we got lots going on in the Zoom chat. So Stacey says being inclusive, listening to what the relationship is with the child. Absolutely, because you really want to make sure that you're being tuned in to all of the relationships that are impacting that child's life. Sasha says include them in home visits or keep all caregivers informed if they cannot be present during the intervention. Yes, and so finding out, Carrie kind of sets us up nicely with that, because she says when scheduling for family meetings, asking the caregiver who would like to be included. And so if they can't be present, also maybe there's a group text with permission, of course, or maybe there's a group email or some kind of way to make sure that you're also keeping them included and informed. And then Kathy says asking what they'd like to be working on and trying to honor, acknowledge that by using coaching and modeling. Absolutely. And finally, Rose says she's an early interventionist, and they do a routines-based interview that really does tell us what the family does or wants to do together, and we kind of build on that. And I love that, Rose, too, because even for those that aren't doing the RBI or the routines-based interview, you can still ask those open-ended questions to really find out who are the people that are surrounding this child, who is important to this child, and who else can you kind of bring in and touch base with. And so sometimes I used to, with some of my visits, I'll go out with the grandparents instead of the parents too, or the grandparents will join us. And so really kind of considering all aspects of that.
Awesome. Excellent. We got a few more over in the Huva chat as well. I have an intro process, interview process to ask how they interact, what they want to do, and what they enjoy doing with each child. That is so important because then it becomes impersonal. It becomes individualized. As you notice, Lisa and I like to start our sessions with telling us a little bit about who we are outside of just our role as early childhood professionals. I think that's really important about parents and caregivers as well. How do you interact and what do you do that you really like? That makes it a little bit more individualized. Provide services across all environments. Absolutely. We try to team as much as possible, Sandra says. As an early interventionist, families tend to ask me for clarification on therapy notes and how they can follow through at home. That's fantastic that they are asking that. And then also we have another one, so they do the RBI with each family following the individual eligibility or initial eligibility. That's fantastic.
Yeah, Sarah also mentioned an interesting viewpoint. She said that she's been following parents in their everyday routines, but it's actually been easier with teleintervention.
Yeah. And we've heard that a lot. I know one of Lisa's colleagues, Dana, did some webinars on teleintervention and the positive aspects of it. And I did a webinar with Brooks on the ASQ and using the ASQ back in March and with our early Head Start teachers. And same thing, the teachers reporting stronger relationships with the parents because the parents had to be involved in their virtual schooling. And even just in delivering the ASQ, it was more of a succinct process, which we would have never thought of 18 months ago. So, all right. So let's move on to the next one, which is responsive interactions. So responsive interactions, we want to think about those interactions that seem brief. How does it make us feel versus when we're feeling truly seen, when we're feeling truly heard or valued? When children feel that we're seen, when children feel genuinely seen, heard, or valued, they feel safe and secure, which is a key component to strong relationships and healthy brain development. So think about those times, even as an adult, if you're trying to tell something important to someone that you care about, that you want them to hear you, and you can tell they're not paying attention, they're not listening, particularly if it's over Zoom, they're turning their camera off. You know, I'm sure some of you have presented and nobody puts their camera on. You want to convey something really, really important. When you feel like you're not being heard or you're not being seen, that's kind of disjointed. It kind of makes you feel like unvalued, right? It makes you feel like nobody's really listening to me and I want them to. So when you think about that from a child's perspective, even as young as an infant, we want them to feel like what they're doing, what they're saying, the facial expressions they're making are being heard and they're being seen by us because we're helping them feel like they're valued. So those responsive interactions can mean that we're following the child's lead by reading their verbal and nonverbal cues. Those back and forth reciprocal exchanges are not one-way interactions where the adult tells the child what to do, but they're going back and forth, kind of like a tennis ball on a tennis court. We're going back and forth. These back and forth interactions are called serve and return, which that tennis ball and playing tennis is usually a very good example of that, a visual example. It can happen during diaper changes. It can happen during meals. It can happen during all different types of regular routines that we're interacting with our babies and our children with throughout the day. And we want to see those serve and return interactions going on throughout the day, throughout those routines, so that parents realize they're actually teaching and they're responding to their child without really having to work at it. They're already doing it, becomes innate and it becomes natural, right? Next slide, please. All right, so when we talk about actually implementing and interacting with responsive interactions, let's talk about those in the moment responses. So read with me on the screen what we're talking about, what's going on in this scenario. Gloria expresses that she's very guilty, that she feels like she's balancing the work and she's balancing being a single mother, and she's just incredibly stressed out. So what would you do to help support Gloria? And go ahead and take a moment to type in the chat. And clearly I can't even talk this morning. It's Friday.
That's how I feel. I'm like, I don't know. It's Friday. I'm like tapped out. I'm sure you guys are feeling that too on the other end.
So go ahead and type in the chat what you would do to help support Gloria.
So you have one in Zoom. I might encourage her to find moments in their daily routines like diapering, feeding, and baths to connect with her baby. Yeah, absolutely. Especially like, look at the picture. Like she's still sitting there. She's holding her. She's engaging her. She can talk to her. She can talk about all the different steps that she's doing, right? As she's making her coffee in the morning.
Yeah.
Oh, and then we have one that then I'd help show or explain what the connection might look like. So yes, you're adding some of that modeling in, right? You're adding some of that coaching model and showing her this is what it would look like. And then you have her practice. That's wonderful, Kathy.
One of the ones in here, okay, looks like Sarah was responding about the stronger relationships with virtual, which you were talking about a minute ago, that they're seeing positive, stronger relationships as well. Though unfortunately their LEA is not really supportive of that. I know a lot of systems are not quite embracing it as much as some others. But to answer this question, Teresa said, any communication interaction is good for your child. In this picture, talk about what you're doing with your child. Absolutely. First, listen actively and empathetically. Absolutely. Listening is so key. And I feel like I have to emphasize that enough, because I don't know that I'm always the best at doing that. You know, taking a moment and going, you know what, I'm going to stop, because I'm a talker. Stop talking and really listen to what somebody else is saying, which can be challenging. It can definitely be challenging, but validate what is going well. Absolutely start with the positives and ask what her greatest struggles are, and then problem solve together. That's fantastic, Sarah. Glenda says, discuss typical daily routines and ways to embed the bonding opportunities without it being an extra task. Absolutely. Like, you want it not to feel more stressful, that what you're asking her to do is something that she's probably already doing and not even realizing it, and saying, do that a little bit more often, and allow yourself and forgive yourself and allow yourself to do that more often. Your kitchen's a mess, you haven't washed the dishes, that's okay. They're still going to be there tomorrow. Take minutes to bond with your baby and enjoy those moments that you have. Teresa says, I totally agree. I'm a problem solver, so am I. So it is hard not to come up with a solution, but to help the parents work through things. Absolutely. I had a good conversation with a friend of mine over the weekend. We had a little girls' weekend away, and I was like, you know, I've really learned to let people use me as a sounding board, but I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm here to help you figure out what you need to do. And when you figure it out as a parent, it actually has more meaning for you, because you figured it out and it's something that you've come up with on your own, which I think we all can take pride in things like that when we feel that way. It makes us feel more powerful and more valued, right? And stronger when we're possibly feeling weak because we're really busy and stressed out. So anything else in Zoom that we should highlight?
We have Stacey says, talking about validating her feelings, which I think is so important, because you are empowering her and letting her know that her feelings matter, right? You're respecting how she's feeling and you're really being in that moment with her. And then also we have Kathy says that she finds sometimes that parents don't realize how important what they're already doing is. Yes. And I love that she said, showing them that what they already do is so special and important, and finding ways to enhance it, it makes them feel more empowered as parents, I think. And think you're absolutely right on track too. And sometimes, especially like when I'm working with a lot of families that feel like they have a busy life, because I can relate to that, right? I told you guys I have 5 kids, I feel like crazy all the time. But, you know, especially with my kids, when they start to show like some behaviors, when we're coming in from work, and, you know, like, I'm like, I got to cook dinner, I got to do this. And then we have to get bath time together, and then we have to do bedtime. And so we were just like on this like set routine, right? But sometimes you have to make those little deposits. So I always tell parents, like, you know, did you deposit any money into the piggy bank, right? So any of that attention into the piggy bank, because sometimes when you get home, take 15 minutes, just put some of those deposits into your child, and then you'll see a decrease in those behaviors, because it'll be less attention seeking too from there.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I don't have anything else in the Hoover chat, so we can move on.
Yeah. Oh, Sarah just added to reassuring that parents, they're doing great, and reminding parents, parenting's hard. Yeah, it doesn't come with a handbook. Yes, right. Parenting is a lifelong journey, right?
You know, and one of the things I used to always tell parents, I'm like, there's no mistakes in parenting. There's just things that you might do differently the next day because they didn't work out the way you want them. It's like the only mistakes are when I have to actually call CPS. And that's usually something's pretty serious, but there's no mistakes when you're trying to be a parent. It's just all figuring it out as we go along, right?
Stressful,
Lisa
right?
do that really well. But it's so true.
Or stress. Yeah, it's stressful. Okay, so the third R is, I don't know if you guys hear Aretha singing R-E-S-P-C-T in your head, but that's what I always think of when I think of respect. So the third R is respect. And respect is really, I don't know, I just always think that it's something that we don't really think about when it comes to children, like respecting children. We think about respecting each other. We think about respecting other adults. We think about respecting colleagues, but not necessarily always respecting children, especially as a parent. Sometimes you're like, whatever I say, whatever I do, like you do it, right? And that's more of that, like that control factor, and it takes a little bit of that respect out. And what respect means is that you are treating that infant and child as valuable individuals whose efforts to communicate their preferences and their needs as important. So what they're doing, what they're saying is mattering. It matters, right? And so that respect, in turn, it's establishing trust, right? And what do we say about relationships? That you need trusting relationships all around you. So respect is really important. I want you guys to kind of think about some of the times that you have felt disrespected before, right? Maybe somebody refused to do something. Maybe somebody avoided your phone call. And so how does that make you feel? How do you feel when you just feel disrespected? Go ahead, type that in the chat or the Whova chat. What are the feelings that come to mind? How do you feel when you feel disrespected?
Sarah said, respect children's space, emotions, preferences, and need for a heads up about upcoming transitions, needs outside of the obvious physical needs. Absolutely. And that is huge right now, given all the transitions we've gone through in the last year and a half.
Yeah. Rose shares not value. Yeah, you don't feel like you have any value. You don't have anything to contribute. Absolutely. Do you see anything in the Whova chat? I see frustrated.
Devalued when not respected. Absolutely. Hurt and confused. Absolutely.
Yeah, hurt and
this
confused.
reminds me of we had a scenario around this where you told me something and you asked me how I felt in another training where we talked about this.
I did. I know. Yep.
And I was like, I feel you were mean at me, because that's how kids feel. Like, you're mean. I don't like that.
So yeah, the things that you guys are putting in chat, these are big emotions. These are big feelings, right? You're feeling frustrated. You're not feeling valued. Do we really want our children to feel like that? No, right? But they feel the same way. So when they feel disrespected, what happens is we tend to react. So the only difference is as adults, because our brain is a lot more developed, even though we do know that brain continues to develop until the mid-20s, right? So even though children, they're feeling these big feelings, they don't know what to do with it. For adults, we can control it, right? We can regulate ourselves, maybe not always, but we can regulate ourselves. And young children, they have a hard time still. So they're really reacting based on their emotions. Fun tip, that children really react based on their emotions for the first 3 years of life. So there's no logic there, right? So they're only reacting based on their emotions up until they're 3. So that's why they really need, excuse me, those relationships and that guidance and that adult to help scaffold them. So it's important to make sure that we're finding a balance of setting limits and addressing some of those challenging behaviors in a way that's going to teach and guide the child versus punish and shame the child. Those are very two different things. Teaching and guiding the child versus punishing and shaming them. So essentially what we're also doing is we are modeling empathy, which is a skill, right? It's a skill that we're learning. And so we're modeling empathy for a child's strong feelings that they have. And we're really seeing that misbehavior as an effort to cope. So they're trying to cope, they're trying to regulate themselves. They might have a hard time doing it, and that's okay, but they're coping with a challenging situation that really requires a lot of understanding and support from us. So what are some examples that we might demonstrate respect to a very young child? Just type those in chat. What are some examples? How do we demonstrate respect for a very young child? Yeah, you can show your young child respect by explaining to them what's going on, asking how they're feeling. Yes, you care, right? You're showing them you care. You talk to them, you assure them, you're honoring their attempts at communication. You're following their lead. You're being present, giving them that eye contact. You're physical comforting. Yeah, and so you're not ignoring their cries all the time, right? right? Just like if somebody were to ignore your phone call, like how does that make you feel? You don't want to always ignore that child's cries, because how would that make them feel if you're ignoring them too? Yeah. So you're honoring the request. You're giving them choices. You guys are nailing these. Yeah, you're talking to them before you take action. So you are explaining things just like we always want things explained to us, right? We're really not that different. What do you see going on in Huva,
A
Patty?
lot of the same things. Eye contact, give them time. Time is huge for kids, absolutely. Getting down on their level. I remember whenever I had interns, the first thing I'd say when you walk into a house is feel comfortable sitting on the floor, because you want those children to feel, and it also puts you below the parent. So they're not looking up to you like you're some authority figure in their home. Or you're all sitting on the floor together, which is definitely showing respect to that child. State their feelings, presence, touch, and play. Give them time to do things at their own pace, absolutely. And recognize and respond to their gestures, cries, and visual contact. Yeah, definitely being aware and paying attention to what's going on and observing. Absolutely.
Yeah. So we're having some of those realistic expectations for their behavior. We know where they are, and we're respecting and understanding where they are developmentally, but we're also understanding the experiences the child may have had, especially if you are in special education too. Understanding where the experiences that they've had outside of your care, or maybe if they are in the home, understanding how everything really impacts that child, and respecting their sensory preferences too, right? So if they don't like loud noises, then we're going to make sure that we're respecting that too. Great. Well, let's keep us moving. All right, so now we're going to get to routines. And so I want you guys to just think about a routine that you have every single morning or every single day, like a routine you have to make sure that you do, and it's very consistent throughout the week. So whether you like to take a shower in the morning, whether you like to go get your cup of coffee in the morning, whether you like to take the same route to work every morning. Yep, there we go, a coffee. We got coffee in the chat. So what happens if that routine becomes interrupted? So let's say, Stacy, that you are going to go and get your morning coffee. Let's say that you like to sit out on the patio, drink your cup of coffee. You like to sit at your table and drink your cup of coffee. You go to get your coffee and there's no more, or your coffee machine just broke down. That is going to throw you completely off the rest of it. You just kind of feel off, right? Because you didn't have your regular cup of coffee. You had a complete disruption in your routine. You might feel really anxious. You might feel out of sorts. And any kind of disruptions or lack of routine, that really makes young children feel the same way. Obviously, the difference is that we're better able to self-regulate ourselves. Kathy says, oh darn, guess I have to stop for a fancy coffee now on the way to work. Yes. Well, there is always a plan B. See, you were regulating yourselves, you're regulating yourself, Kathy, there. And then you used your executive functioning skills and you made a different plan and you adjusted. And so adults can do that, but children have a very hard time doing that. So when they have those disruptions in their routines, it's just hard. And that predictable sequence of events, it's really helping to build those strong brain connections that really support memory and those organizational skills, right? And so it's building an extra layer of that sense of security of helping children to know how, know when things will happen. I remember when my youngest, he was super anxious all the time, and he just had to know everything, like, and then what's going to happen, and then what's going to happen, and then what are we going to do? But what if this happens? And so there was just all of these feelings that he was feeling inside. And I always thought to myself, I was like, man, like he's expressing this now because he's verbal, but imagine all of that anxiety that he was having when he was nonverbal. And it was just coming off as a lot of behavioral challenges that we faced, a lot of crying, a lot of temper tantrums. And so I reflect a lot on that now. And I kind of look back and I'm like, maybe I should have explained things a little bit more to him versus just kind of go, go, go. And so really those routines, that's going to create that sense of safety. That's going to calm those bottom functions of the brain. That's going to allow the children greater access to the top functions of the brain, like your working memory, your focus, attention. So let's think about some routines. So what I want you guys to do, get a pen and paper. pen and paper. I'm sure everyone probably has it already because you've been in conference all week, right? Now, what I want you to do is write down a routine. Just write down, think about a child's routine. So write that down. Maybe you can write down a couple of routines too, but just write down a routine. Now I want you to look at least one of those routines. Write down some of those micro routines. Now, when I say micro routines, those are the different steps that are within that large routine. So let's say that you said going outside. So some of the micro routines might be getting your shoes on before you go outside, going to open the door, taking a step off of the curb to get down. So thinking really about that, breaking all those different steps down, right? Or maybe it's bedtime. So if you have bedtime and you like to read a book before you go and pick out your book, and then you pick out your pajamas, and then you brush your teeth before bed. Even brushing your teeth has different micro routines, right? And so I want you guys to think about all of those larger routines that we're working with and we're supporting children, and how we can break those different steps down, because that's where you're going to find your best interventions, when you're really kind of supporting the parent within those different micro routines and breaking it down, versus like sometimes I feel like we're always just going and doing play on the floor with the child, or we're always just going and doing like snacks or meal times with the child. Like, let's really think about it. Like, if you think about, for example, car rides, like you're going to the car, the child's sitting in the car, the child has to step up on the ledge, they might help climb up and climb into their car seat. Then they're going to turn around and they're going to put their buckles up, and they might even try to help you push those buckles in. So really breaking it down, because there's so many different skills that we can really help support parents in within those micro routines. And then we got to think too, let's think about what if that routine was interrupted. So let's say bedtime was interrupted because maybe there's an older sibling that has a baseball game at night and the parent didn't get home till 9 o'clock, like they're completely thrown off. Then that child might have a lot more behaviors. They might have a little bit less sleep at night. And so the next day they might feel a little bit crankier too, right? So just thinking about that. Now hold that in mind, because now we're going to go to repetition and we'll think about those routines again. But repetition, right? So that is where the brain is really establishing connections in response to experiences. So those experiences that the child has within those routines. So the more an experience is repeated, the stronger the brain connection is going to be related to those experiences. If you guys remember, I don't know, I'm probably aging myself a little bit, but when I was little, we used to always play this game where you would go, like me and my cousins and my siblings, we would go and we would like touch different parts of the house. Like I would go first, I would touch something, and then my brother would go and then he'd touch something and touch somewhere else. And then so it was like one of those like sequencing, like memory, like remembering where we touched, and we had to do it in order. And then the first one that failed, like lost, or like we would do the ABC one where you say like A is for apple, and then my brother would say A is for apple, B is for boy, and so on. And so those kind of memory games, that's that repetition, right? So that's why you remember, because you're repeating it over and over again, right? And so children, when they're hearing some of those like same songs, they're hearing the same stories, they're going on the same walks, and they're stimulating the same senses that they have. So their muscles, the skills that are even involved in those activities, that's really building a stronger brain connection. Cognition, language, physical skills, social emotional abilities, all of those can really be supported through repetition. So I'm sure you guys have heard this phrase, practice makes what? Put in the chat, practice makes. Did you get any, Patty, yet? Yep, perfect.
Perfect, yep.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. So actually, practice is going to make permanent, because we are cementing those neurological connections in the brain. And the brain needs a lot of opportunities to try something over and over and over again, right? I always think about children's first words, for example. It's usually something that's a favorite person or a favorite item, right? That's usually the word that they say. But think about how many times they've heard that word, right? Before. Usually the favorite words are the things you say the most, like milk, ball, mama, dada, whatever it may be that's important to the child. Oh, Kathy adds, I also think it's important to help parents and teachers do the micro routines in a consistent way too, especially for kids who have complex access needs. Yeah, using the same language. So that's where that repetition comes in, right? Using the same language, the same order, the same prompts, right? Because we are providing stronger connections. Because we know once if you were to break away and not do some of those steps, then that's where that pruning starts to happen, right? Yeah, we're being consistent, generalized, easier, smoother. Perfect can be a tough word. Perfect absolutely is a tough word. But what we want to see happen is that we are supporting children in positive ways. So let's think of some of those negative ways where children might associate an activity negatively. If we are trying to really push skills that are above a child's level, that is going to cause them a lot of stress. It is not building positive brain connection, but it's also going to interfere with their love of learning. I have seen so many kids in early intervention, especially before we started like transitioning to this coaching way, but I've seen so many kids in early intervention who avoided tasks, who did not feel confident. Their self-esteem was very low. They avoided any kind of interactions with people where there were expectations placed on them. And that's really because they're losing that love of learning, their confidence is down, and so they're completely avoidant. So we want to really make sure that we're just being mindful of that. And we also want to make sure that we're giving children lots of consistent opportunities. And so when we think about this repetition, we think about those routines that you guys wrote down, then we're exploring each of those routines with the families, and we're really identifying, okay, what are some challenges? What are some opportunities? I love making like visuals and lists with parents too, and kind of like graphing it out because like I'm a visual person, but I do it if the parent's a visual person, not if they aren't. So we talk about like what their learning style is, but it really helps too, but it helps the parents really think about and break those steps down. Okay, so what happens on the car rides? What happens when we're walking the dog? What are the different steps? What does that look like? Tell me more. Tell me what that looks like. All right, so now what I want to do, okay, you guys have a handout. In Whova, if you go under our bios, there is a scenario handout. I'm going to kind of read you through it and kind of talk you through it. And then we're going to really think and be mindful and intentional, right, about how the 5R's apply. So we're going to spend about the next 20 minutes on this activity. So let's get started. So I want you guys to really think about the 5R's. Think, Tammy, it should be, if you go into the Whova app, like where you join the session, if you scroll down under our bios, you'll see the handout there. So I'll give you a few seconds to go ahead and pull that up. And so really what the purpose of that handout, there is a blank template for the 5R's of healthy brain development, and it has each R listed. And you'll see it once we finish going through the scenario. I'm going to actually have a screenshot of it, but you'll see each R listed, and then you'll see what are some reasons of impact of that child, of that 5R, and what are some strategies to support. So that's where we're going to work through some of that intentionality. Okay, so meet Lucy, Angelo's mother. Lucy referred Angelo, 19 months old, to early intervention for language and behavioral concerns. Angelo says mama and cries to get his needs met. Lucy reports that Angelo has a hard time with transitions and adjusting to new people. His father, Thomas, recently returned from deployment after a year. This has been exceptionally hard because Angelo clings to Lucy all day and cries if she leaves the room. Angelo has begun waking up several times at night. His mother is feeling overwhelmed and tired because it's hard for her to take care of things around the house. Thomas stated he feels frustrated because Angelo cries no matter what he does and he cannot figure out what he wants. Lucy's parents live in another state, but they come to visit to help care for Angelo frequently. As the practitioner, you are gathering this information about Angelo and his family, and you also observe him crying when placed on his father's lap. So now we're going to really think about the 5R's of healthy brain development. I don't know why this picture always like makes me sad, because you can see the stress that this family is feeling, right? So let's go ahead and think about those. So Again, here are the 5 R's. We're going to really put them into practice. I am going to, we're going to try to use the annotate. Well, I'm going to use the annotate, and we're going to talk about these strategies. Okay. So here on the screen, you see the 5 R's to healthy brain development, right? So this is kind of what your handout basically looks like. Usually, like, I'll write the child's goals. So we have Angelo will use 2 to 3 word phrases to share his feelings: sad, tired, happy, ask for what he wants, Lego, snack outside, and or talk about things in his home, book, water, bed, 5 times daily over 3 weeks. So let's start really breaking this down. And Patty, if you don't mind just watching Huva, and I'm going to actually try to type some things on screen. I mean, obviously I gave you guys the answer, some of the answers that we came up with for the scenario, but let's just talk about like what you think. So what are some things that are impacting relationships here? What are some reasons of impact on relationships for Angelo?
Deployment.
Ooh, that's really big. Hold on.
Father being gone. I actually can see the Zoom chat too when it pops across. Yeah, father being gone.
I'm just going to make this a little bit smaller. Okay.
Mother is the primary caregiver.
Yep.
Maybe, okay, Zoom one's going a little faster. Anxiety. It's coming up there.
I see it. Yeah, mom. Anxiety, okay.
Yeah.
Mother knows her child's needs very well.
Yeah.
And she's obviously responsive to him too throughout the day because he's around her all the time, right? He's following her around.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right. Okay.
Angela has a hard time adjusting to new people.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. I know I'm going like over these lines now. I'm going to try to make it smaller.
Okay. This was an experiment to see how it works.
I know. I was like, let's try this. Okay, there we go.
There we go.
All right. Cool. So now we have that. Now let's do what are some strategies to support Angelo and his family? So think about, let's start with deployment and the father. Let's think about that relationship with his father first. What are some strategies here?
Trying to figure out where the child now fits into the relationship. FaceTime while away. Teach dad some I love you rituals that can encourage bonding. Oh, I love that. Thank you, Sandra. Photo albums. Yeah, I'm a scrapbooker too. I didn't even mention that in the beginning, but yeah, I think the power of pictures and preserving memories is fantastic, especially for little guys. Make a dad book with pictures for him to look at. Absolutely.
Oh yeah, like an experience story. I love it.
Yeah, an experience story. Singing special songs just with dad. Family picture books. Yeah. Power of photos, right?
Yeah.
They've been around forever,
And and it's really important to think about that. Thinking about like dad probably has a lot of anxiety, right? Because he just got back. He probably feels like a little bit of that parent guilt of his child like not wanting to connect with him right now, and always wanting to be with his mother and crying every time he like picks them up or tries to do anything. And so really even validating dad's feelings too and being there and supporting him, and that can really be a lot of help for the family too. And starting there, and finding those play activities.
Sarah typed daddy deployment bear, like I'm assuming like a teddy bear. That's cool. I like that. That's a good idea too. Like a security toy. Explain developmental stages, prep for re-entry. Yeah, there's a transition there. Absolutely.
Yeah, and then Kathy says, finding those activities, those child preferred activities that dad joins in slowly. Absolutely, Kathy. Okay, so let's go to the next one, which is responsive interactions. What are some reasons of impact?
Oh, Sarah, the deployment bear is a uniform stuffed people with clear panels for parent photos. Oh, how cool is that? Never heard of that. That's neat. Okay. Anybody on responsive interactions, reason for impact on that one?
What could be impacting those responsive interactions with his family?
Not understanding the child's cues. Yes, absolutely. That's huge.
Mhm.
It's that taking a minute to step back and observe. Parents' own feelings. Absolutely.
Okay, so now what are some strategies to support some of that stress that the family's feeling, that the mother's feeling? She's obviously feeling like a little bit overwhelmed, especially because she wants to get things done. She's having a hard time getting things done too. Yeah, being fatigued and tired emotionally. So lots of feelings going on with her families, with the parents too. So how can we support those responsive interactions? What are some strategies here?
Teaching parents to step back and take care of their own needs. Yeah, that's fantastic. That's another training I want to do, is just remembering to take care of yourself as a parent, especially in the last year. I think that's huge, particularly when we think about responsive interactions.
Mhm.
Now that Dad's home, making sure mom is getting some breaks to recharge so she can be responsive. Yeah.
Yeah, I used to have
Recharging.
this family, and she just felt trapped. You know, like when you feel like you're trapped inside the house all day too, like that's really hard for a parent. And so we talked about like just being creative and thinking about ways to give yourself a spa day while being at home, even whether it's laying down on the floor, putting your feet up on the couch and putting like a nice hot rag, like or cool rag on your forehead and listening to some music, or listening to music while cleaning. Like that's always like one that families really like to do, that kind of perks them up a little bit more too.
I always used to say, like, take 5 minutes to read like a simple magazine like People magazine that requires no brain, thinking, or reading a book that's not related to parenting or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Ask mom to explain during a session how she knows what he needs. This can help dad hear his son's voice versus potentially internalizing the message that he isn't parenting well. Yeah, that's fantastic.
Well, Kathy actually gave us a really good example too. Thanks, Kathy, for typing that all up. She said, like supporting, like mom can really support dad in reading her child's cue, or their child's cue. So saying, like, oh, he's signaling he wants a snack. Can you grab him some goldfish? And dad is starting to learn how to interpret some of those cues. Yes, I love it so much. And the child's learning how that trust and dad can really meet his needs. Yeah. Oh, Sarah says, yeah, it's her favorite thing to go over with parents. And she also talks about the airplane scenario too. So really putting the oxygen on yourself before you can really take care of your child. Just like when you're in the airplane and the flight attendant says, put it on yourself first before you put the oxygen mask on the child. Yeah. All right, let's go to the next one. Let's see. Okay, now let's think about respect. What are some reasons of impact here? Got anything in the Hoover chat? This one's a little bit harder to think about, I think, sometimes.
Not really. Not yet.
But respect is always a harder one to really think about, and what's going on. Okay, Sarah says, dad can respect Angelo's feelings by noting his nonverbal cues. So dad is really respecting his feeling. I'm going to put this actually over in the strategies because that is a good strategy, respecting nonverbal cues.
Sarah had another strategy, giving dad time to Zoom, or I'm assuming she meant giving the child time to Zoom with dad rather than just a quick hello. respect the fact that we'll take time for Angelo to trust him. Yes, that is huge things to think about. Letting A come to dad at his own pace. Absolutely. Making sure the child feels heard and acknowledging the parent's feelings of frustration. Yeah, y'all, we're paying attention. I love it.
Let's see. Kathy says, I'm wondering if there are traditional or cultural impacts on parents showing respect to children. I don't mean that not a judgment. No, I think that's a great way, but yeah, she's just not sure that all parents think this way. And that's a really good thought. And that's something we always want to take into consideration. And so like one thing we can always ask parents is like, what would you like this to look like? How would you like to respond? And so that way you can gain a little bit more insight onto what are their viewpoints, what are their cultural norms and their expectations too.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point. I'm glad somebody brought that up because we do need to think about that. Absolutely.
Yeah, and Angelo, he wants to feel safe, right? He wants to feel safe. He's very clingy, like towards his mother all the time. We know that he also has some of those nonverbal things going on. And so he's having a hard time communicating his emotions, right? And so we really want to make sure that we're thinking about that and considering that. All right, let's move us on to the next one. Let's think about routines. What are some things that might be impacting his routines? Which is actually kind of similar to the first one.
Well, I was just thinking, I have a good friend who's in a very similar situation, and her husband's gone for 3 months at a time. And whenever he comes home, she's always like, he disrupts our routine because she has a routine with her kids that they've developed while he's been gone. And then all of a sudden he comes back and he's like, I don't know what your routine is, and totally messes everything up and drives her crazy because she's very stuck in her routine. So
well, and sometimes it disrupts. So not only that, it's not only disrupting the child's routine, it's disrupting sometimes the caregiver, the partner's routine as well. Yeah, and so thinking about those routines, finding that new routine with dad. So how can we support him in routines?
Sarah put in time zone differences too. Yeah, that's huge.
Oh yeah. That's a good one. That's a good possibility of impact too.
Yes, absolutely.
Picture. Yep.
Sorry guys, we're rushing because we're looking at the time here.
I know. We're not going to finish the last one, but so we'll probably go ahead and wrap up here. But so the difference with this activity, what is really happening is that we are being very, let me close my annotation bar. We are being really intentional. Oh, let me pull my annotation bar up again. Let me clear. Okay. We are being really intentional about thinking through those 5 R's and what are the reasons of impact, what's really going on, and how can we support it? Because we find out sometimes is when we aren't intentional, we don't reflect a little bit more about the full picture of what's going on with the family, then we're not always really in tune with how we can best support them or thinking about some of those other strategies. So intentionality is key to support families in meeting their fullest potential. So feel free to take this handout and you can use it, and just when you're thinking about working with a kid or you really want to work on those 5 R's, jot down the reasons of impact and then jot down specific strategies and do this with the parent too. Really talk it through, because sometimes what I have found is that it raises the parent's own self-awareness and helps them reflect back on what's going on too. So what we do know is that we all play an important role, right? We play a key role in supporting healthy brain development, even if we're supporting the parents, right? Because we have to be thinking about it. All children's brains, they are like sponges. They are really growing at such a rapid pace. And so every single one of you plays such an important role to really support healthy brain development. We know that children need at least one secure attachment, right? But building those positive relationships with other caregivers, that still matters. And then we want to make sure that we are holding everything in mind, all those pieces together, because intentionality, you have to intentionally hold each component in mind when considering those strategies to support each family. Because you probably realize too, through that activity, there might have been some things that you thought of that you probably wouldn't have thought of in the moment in the home with the family too. So yeah, it's very important. So we just want to say thank you for joining us for our session today. We so value all of the engagement you guys gave us for Friday and the last day of conference. That was great and wonderful. If you guys have questions, feel free to type those in chat. If you want to reach out to Patty or myself individually, feel free to do that too. Our emails are there for you. We so appreciate you. Thank you. And we hope you guys have a good rest of your Friday, or Friday. I call it Friday. It's my Friday.
Excellent. Thank you guys. I'm seeing a lot of these nice comments in the chat, both sides. Wonderful.